What's up, dummies? Jesse Stormer here of Stormer Performance, back with some incredible fitness content. This is going to be a little bit of a longer video today. I am working on producing more long-form content for the purposes of providing more education around certain topics. There was a really great study released recently that discussed recovery from high rep versus low rep sets. Now, I'm not going to get super into why that really matters sort of for the average lifter, per se. I want to kind of go into how this ties in for team sport athletes and why you might see a certain structure to the programming for a lot of team, or let's say sport athletes, right? So people who are not playing, so people who don't participate in strength sports. Oh, by the way, beautiful Brennan, Washington, unbelievable, on the Olympic Peninsula, fucking stunning, absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so excuse me. The study looked at recovery, and what they found is that high rep sets are significantly more difficult to recover from. Now, for those of us who have ever done sort of like a bodybuilding style training program or have participated, especially in a team sport lifting program, right? This is something that we've actually probably already empirically figured out. Bodybuilding tends to be high rep. Right, and you also tend to do body part splits, and you tend to allocate a lot of time for recovery, and that works really, really well. You're sort of combining a lot of different stimuli. So high rep sets are actually going to combine a lot of, there's going to be, sort of the tension, muscle building aspect. There's going to be metabolic fatigue, right? There's going to be that's primarily due to the complete usage of oxygen. So local, local utilization of oxygen. So in the muscle itself, right? And you're also probably going to fatigue a bunch of different kinds of muscle fibers. Like you're going to fatigue fast twitch, slow twitch. There's a lot more. There's actually 7 or 8, depending on who you ask. But you're going to fatigue all the muscle fibers because you are really just squeezing out every last bit of ability to lift from a muscle. And so if lifting is your primary activity, that's really, really great. And if you want to take a muscle to the most extreme fatigue possible, that's an excellent strategy. And taking a muscle to the most extreme form of fatigue possible is a really, really great way to grow that muscle. However, for a team sport athlete, right, and what they found is high rep sets are easy to recover from. There's probably a couple different reasons. Low rep sets are easy to recover from. And there's, again, probably a few different reasons. We discussed why a high rep set might be difficult to recover from. And the fact of the matter is imagine we have a 10 rep max, and we are able to get 9 reps. That means we've achieved 90% fatigue if we lift for 9 reps, and that's 90% fatigue. Now, if we have a 4 rep max and we do 3 reps, right, we've achieved 75% fatigue. So probably we're actually maybe not always achieving the same level of fatigue as we might with a high rep set. As we get, we actually approach failure in smaller and smaller increments, so we can actually get closer, right? Because the increment between that rep and failure is little, so we can pack in as many reps in that space as possible. Imagine there's kind of that old allegory of the jar where they fill it with one big rock and they say, "Is this full?" And professor stands in front and says, "Is this full?" And so everybody says no, and then he fills it with smaller rocks and he says, "Is this full?" And a couple people say yeah, and then he fills it with sand, and a couple people more say it's filled, and then and then he fills it with water, and then people are like, "Oh, it's finally filled," right? And so you can think of a high rep set as I keep thinking high weight, low rep. So you can think of a low rep set as putting one big rock, or, 3 or 4 big rocks, right? And then a high rep set is going to be packing everything you possibly can into that jar. So we're probably not getting the same level of fatigue. There's probably, some people will describe like CNS fatigue, central fatigue, and that's probably a reality. We're probably getting some of that. But especially for those of us, again, who are playing a team sport, right, we're going to have other demands other than lifting. We're going to have field practice. We're going to have contact practice. I'm thinking primarily rugby here. I'm primarily a rugby player. But, this is going to be true for lacrosse, football, baseball, basketball. Any team sport you can think of, you're going to have field and sport-specific sessions that are going to create fatigue and put demands on your recovery. If you're participating in a sport where you were doing some regular form of conditioning or speed training, which you should be doing if you play any speed sport, right? Or any field sport, football, soccer, lacrosse, rugby. And to be honest, even if you're playing baseball and basketball, you should be doing some speed training at some point. I mean, especially for baseball with base stealing. But even with basketball, chances are at some point you should be doing some speed training. There's a lot of running in basketball. So you're going to have all those demands. Then you're going to have the demands of actually playing your sport on game day. And so it becomes really, really important to manage fatigue, right? And so one of the things that people will describe is their ability to do high intensity outputs with low volume. And so what low rep sets do is they really express you a lot of high intensity without having a lot of volume, keeping that fatigue down. So that's why you see, and empirically we've kind of figured this out, is you can pull up program after program for pro and collegiate sport athletes, and you are very rarely going to find an in-season program where somebody's doing like 10 sets of squats, unless that is somebody who's been specifically, like, they're on a specific program. So a lot of football programs, right, they'll have some sort of freshman lift or transfer lift, right, where you're doing like really crazy high rep sets to put as much muscle on you as possible. That's very common. But that person is not expected to have a lot of playing time, right? That person, right, that freshman isn't really expected. They're not expected to take the field. And in fact, I've seen players pulled because they were expected to play the next day. So that's why you're often going to see a lot of programs where it's like for squats, you might only see 2 sets of 3 heavy squats, right? For back squats or deadlifts. I mean, not a lot of straight bar deadlifting in pro collegiate sports, but like a trap bar deadlift. For some sort of like clean variation or something like that, same thing, you might be looking at pretty low reps. And there's good reason for that, is that you can actually like maintain a lot of strength, and even sometimes even in a trained athlete develop a little bit of strength, as long as you're really sort of like not pushing the limits of fatigue and recovery. So, I think most of us can recover from 2 sets of 3 squats if they're heavy, right? Most of us will be able to recover from that. But even when you start doing 3 sets of 10, imagine a 3 set of 10 back squat. I mean, if you're really going hard, that's enough to kick your ass. I mean, like 3 sets of 10 back squats, close to our 10 rep max, maybe even 11 or 12 rep max. I mean, that's still going to be brutal when it comes to how you feel after that. So I think this scientific study is just a really great way to demonstrate a principle that we've already applied in a lot of training programs. So, if you're ever wondering why you see that, when I program for a lot of people, it's rare. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these are big compound lifts. If you're doing if you're doing smaller, more isolated lifts, it's going to be a little bit different. The fatigue is just lower, right? I'm not terribly concerned about the same level of fatigue if someone's doing 3 sets of 10 leg extensions. It's just not the same. if someone's doing an arm hypertrophy workout, I'm probably not concerned terribly about their recovery as long as it's not before game day, right? So, stuff like that. It's sort of the big compound lifts, bench press, hang clean, back squat, or, any squat variation, anything, it can be a Zercher squat, it can be a front squat, it can be a trap bar deadlift, especially those big bilateral symmetrical lower body lifts. You're really, really going to want to keep the volume down in season. And to be honest, if you're doing a lot of sprint training and conditioning, where you're getting a big lower body fatigue stimulus, I don't know how much volume you're going to need to even move the needle from a muscularity standpoint. I mean, at least for me personally, anecdotally speaking, and this is true for other athletes I've worked with, I've seen some people whose legs really, from a size standpoint, did not respond to anything other than sprinting. I would actually say this is true of myself, like a lot of guys, team no calves. And it wasn't until I really started incorporating like a lot of acceleration work that I started seeing any calf hypertrophy or any meaningful calf hypertrophy from my standpoint. So, take that for what it is. If you have any questions, I don't know, put them in the comments. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, hire me, give me some fucking money. Yeah? Yeah? You like that? Okay, sounds good.